Happy New Year and welcome to Short Shifts, a product of the NHL Wraparound podcast for Friday, January 2nd, 2026. Vic Morren, Neil Smith. Happy New Year, sir.
How did we ever get to 2026? I just looked around and it was 1999, and I thought that was a big deal.
Well, I'm going to give you some big deal because to start the year, thought we'd open up on a high note, and in recent episodes of Short Shifts and NHL Wraparound, we've been doing calls to action that if you are listening on Apple or Spotify and any other platform that you have the ability to leave comments or reviews, we're asking you to do so, and also to subscribe if you tune into us on YouTube. And Listen Notes is a website that does measures on 3.7 million podcasts worldwide. And we moved on the 29th of December to one of the top 5% podcasts globally. So people are listening, people are tuning in. It was a great year of growth for us and something that we continue to look to do in 2026.
And please keep subscribing. Keep telling your friends to subscribe. Keep asking people to give us a chance, try us, listen to us, and we're going to keep going.
We open on a high note, but I'm going to turn to Scrooge now, even though the holidays are in the rearview mirror. The Olympic rosters were submitted on Wednesday, New Year's Eve, and the Olympic teams were actually revealed on Friday with Team USA. And this was a total tire fire, the way this took place, because Jack Hughes appeared on the Today Show along with a player from the women's Olympic team and a Paralympian to announce their clubs. But when they showed the rosters, they cut inside to 3 floor-to-ceiling screens which panned across each of the positions, forwards, defense, and goaltenders, and you could hardly read them. And then they directed you to the Today Show website where there were no positions listed. And on top of that, there was the leak that came out that Clayton Keller, Tage Thompson, Seth Jones were additions to the team, and Adam Fox didn't make the team. So to me, this isn't on Bill Guerin. This was just a total screw-up in terms of how Team USA was revealed.
And I guess that's on USA Hockey, but, I don't understand why this thing has to be so hyped up the way it is, but I guess that's modern-day media.
Yeah, well, that's NBC with their typical hype and flourish and all this other stuff, and I'm just going to tell you, it didn't come off well. Now, contrary to that, on Wednesday, Team Canada did reveal their team, much more polished, and you can make the debate of who should have made it, who shouldn't have made it, that Matthew Schaefer, Connor Bedard, Mark Scheifele, Sam Bennett, and Wyatt Johnston were not among the players selected, but they will all be on call in the event that injuries take place. And we've seen this season with the condensed schedule, the amount of injuries that have taken place. So even though all 25-man rosters have already been submitted, adjustments can be made up until the start of the tournament about 4.5 weeks from now. And of course, there's going to be injuries. And the odds of that not happening are about the same as me being elected the next pope. But we know that's not happening anytime soon.
And we've already had an injury yesterday. Bo Horvat got injured in the Islanders game against Utah and went off the ice favoring his left knee. He was going to get examined today by the doctors to see what the extent of that injury is. And he's a Team Canada rostered player. So there could be an opening right there.
And of course, now the hype that went along with that, and up in Canada, right away, the speculation started, well, which players were glaring omissions. Well, there's no glaring omissions here because Doug Armstrong said that players that were selected are based on a certain style, and players that may need to be replaced, they are going to be replaced based on a style that John Cooper wants to play with his club. And already there's some heat because Anthony Cirelli, Brendan Hagel have been selected. They're Cooper's guys. But you can't have 25 superstars or 25 of the absolute best players in Canada all on one team. You need role players to round out a club properly, and this is what Armstrong has done. But of course, now the speculation is all over the place of why certain players made it, why certain didn't. So I turn the table over to you.
Well, you know what I have to say to that? Who cares? Who cares? I don't care what these people say. Armstrong picked his team. The coach is going to be the coach, John Cooper, and let's get on with it. Couldn't care less who says who should be on, who shouldn't be on. It is what it is.
For the record, the defense for Canada, the same 8 players as was named for the Four Nations tournament back in February, and Jordan Binnington was selected. And you remember all of the talk when he was struggling during the course of the season and that maybe he won't make the team. But as Armstrong has said, his resume and his body of work speaks for itself, not only leading the Blues to the Stanley Cup in 2019, but also being the goaltender for the Four Nations tournament. And Armstrong even admitted this season, his club has not played very well in front of Binnington, and total justification for naming him to this squad again.
Can you imagine if they'd left him off after he just won the Four Nations? It'd be ridiculous. I mean, I don't even think that he should even be defending that.
2 names that jumped out that were named to Canada. Tom Wilson, who celebrates his naming to the team with 2 goals and an assist against the Rangers on Wednesday. He had the Gordie Howe hat trick because he also had a fight after knocking Noah Laba out with a beautiful open ice hit. He fought Sam Carrick. And considering the fact that this game is even going to be on a smaller ice surface, this is a terrific naming for Team Canada.
Yeah, I don't see how they could not put Tom Wilson on the way he's playing this season. I mean, he's the leader of the Washington Capitals. He's a guy that's a fierce competitor, and I'm glad they've got him on there. I think a lot of people would be disappointed if Tom Wilson wasn't going to the Olympics.
He's the ultimate power forward in the league right now. He scored his 22nd goal Thursday against Ottawa. This guy is a unicorn in the NHL because he'll fight you. He will knock you down with body checks. He's got great hands, great acumen, and you can see the way he has matured as a player. And I think, like we've already said, completely worthy addition to this club.
I think so. And there were days when Brad Marchand was thought of as shouldn't be on that team. He became a more complete player, and you wouldn't even think twice about him not being on the team. So I like what they've done. They need a little bit of salt and pepper on this team, and that's what they've got. They've added pieces, and they look like they've put together a complete hockey team and not just an all-star team.
I also love the fact that Macklin Celebrini was selected, and at 19 is the youngest ever to represent Canada in an NHL-involved tournament, and he celebrated his naming to the Olympic squad with a goal and an assist in the shootout winner over Minnesota on Wednesday. The Sharks are wild card 1, entering the first weekend of the new year.
And good for them. And they've suffered through a lot out there in Northern California to finally get to a spot where, you know what, they might make the playoffs this season. They might not, but they've done a lot of work. They've done a lot of building, and there's a bright future for the San Jose Sharks.
Let's get off the Olympics and go to some hot cold. And we'll start with the teams that are en fuego, as I butcher the Spanish language. The Colorado Avalanche ended 2025 on the highest of notes, a 6-1 win over St. Louis for their 9th straight win, They are 32-7 for the year. And in that game against St. Louis, they outshot them 43-13, out-attempted the Blues 69-28. Nathan MacKinnon, 2 goals, 2 assists. His 400th career goal is included in that. Val Nichushkin with a hat trick. That game was 4-0, less than 5 minutes into it. And this is a Colorado team that every night wants to go out and show everybody they are looking to claim their place in history.
You know, the big story of this game was the 4 goals in the first 5 minutes. It was stunning when you watch that game. It looked like it could end up 15-2. It really did. I mean, it was just embarrassing for the St. Louis Blues, and poor Jim Montgomery, who was stuck behind the bench there having to watch all of this. And it was an embarrassment for the Blues, but it was also showed the power of the Avalanche and how strong they are. And they are just rolling right now.
But if I told you that they were the second hottest team in the NHL, what would you say?
Go ahead and tell me who's first.
The Buffalo Sabres tied a franchise record with their 10th straight win coming in St. Louis and Dallas. They've gone from last in the East, 8 points out of a playoff spot, to wild card 2. Tage Thompson, 2 goals and an assist in that game in Dallas. The Sabres finished their 3-game road trip in Columbus on Saturday and then play 6 out of 7 at home, where they've been terrific this season. This is a stunning reversal of fortune for this club, because we had a show focusing on the Sabres earlier in the season, how they were off to another miserable start, and Lindy Ruff was supposedly on the hot seat, and this looks like a very cohesive unit at the start of the new year.
Well, I hope it does. They've won 10 straight. I mean, it's not going to look like a ragtag group that wins 10 straight.
No, but it's the way they look, though. There's a confidence about this team that we haven't seen in many years.
Yeah, I'd say about 14.
Well, you got to remember one thing, that they have won 10 in a row 3 times before, and the last time was 2018-19, and they still didn't make the playoffs that year.
Winning streaks are usually followed by losing streaks. We'll have to see what happens. I'm not going to anoint them a playoff spot right now, but it's a great way to finish up 2025 and start 2026 for the Buffalo Sabres, and gives those people in Western New York some hope that their Sabres could return to the playoffs after this historic drought of 14 years.
I'm just saying, I like their carriage right now. I like every part of their game. And even though Alex Lyon looks like he's going to be out for a bit in goal, PekkaLuukkonen and Colton Ellis, who's back off IR, seem to be plenty for this team to go forward and continue their success. But you never say never, and you never say always in this league. Another team staying hot, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Their winning streak now up to 6 games after wins at Anaheim and Los Angeles on Wednesday and Thursday. John Cooper, 1,000 games behind the Lightning bench. He's won 595 times in those 1,000 games. The Thursday game in LA, Lightning were down late, and they scored 3 goals to beat the Kings, who continue to struggle at home.
And it's inexplicable why the Kings have such a bad home record. They actually had a great home record only a short time ago, and for some reason this season can't win at home, and they can't score. They're having real problems scoring. The Kings have got a lot of work to do. They're not in a good place. They're not playing well.
And perhaps that game against Anaheim for the Kings was an aberration. You would have thought that the Kings had everything going for them, because Will Ferrell was in the crowd, front row seat, at that game on Thursday against the Lightning in full referee attire. So you would think that, hey, we've got everything on our side, but not to be. So regardless of what weapons the Kings bring out, winning at home, like you said, has been a problem. And if this continues into the second half of the season, Kings are going to be hard-pressed to make the playoffs. Last club we want to mention being hot, and this is more about how they're playing at home than anything else. Calgary Flames, 9 out of their last 10. They're in wild card 5. 1 point out of the second wild card after beating Philadelphia 5-1 on Wednesday. The Flyers had come in off a win against Vancouver where Rick Tocchet made his return to Vancouver for the first time since departing for Philly over the summer. But you got to give Ryan Huska and his group a lot of credit. We, amongst other people, didn't give this club a shot after a very dormant offseason, and they've managed to pull themselves back to the fringes of a playoff spot.
Yeah, they have, and it's been remarkable, really, when you think about it, because we questioned the goaltending. When I say we, everybody questioned their goaltending after it started. They only had Dustin Wolf, and then he went cold. And their backup is Cooley, but here they now sit at NHL 500. They're 12-5-2 at home. So give them credit. There's a number of teams that we're talking about that have done some really good things unexpectedly. We talked about the San Jose Sharks earlier and Celebrini making Team Canada for the Olympics and how good these Sharks are right now being in wild card 1. And then you talk about the Flames. I mean, people wouldn't have thought that these two teams would be anywhere close to the playoffs right now.
But isn't this what makes this great, is the level of unpredictability? And, we go on before the start of the season. We look at the teams that we think that are going to make the playoffs, and we think we're going to go 16 out of 16. And we didn't last year, and we're not going to this year because of the surprises that come up during the course of the year. And that unpredictability is really the best part of the journey of the NHL season.
It really is. The other team of the three we've already talked about, the Lightning, the Sabres, and the Flames, right now are all hot. And you wouldn't have thought that they'd be hot at any time when the season started.
As you like to say, after every winning streak, there's a losing streak. Well, perhaps this will go in reverse, that after every losing streak, there's a winning streak, because now we're going to flip the page and go to Ace Frio, the teams that are cold. And when are we going to put the Jets in the same category as last year's Rangers in terms of a President's Trophy missing the postseason the next year? Winnipeg has now lost 8 in a row. They lost their 7th straight on Wednesday. It was actually the first matchup between former teammates in Chicago, Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves. That was a 2-1 loss for the Jets in Detroit. And then on Thursday, they blew leads of 4-1 and 5-4 to the Toronto Maple Leafs in a game which Auston Matthews had a hat trick and an assist. 7 of those 8 losses have come by 1 goal, and the other one was 1 goal plus an empty net. The Jets are the first President's Trophy winner, or defending President's Trophy winner, to be last in the overall standings at the end of that same calendar year. It is remarkable.
It is, and I've been in that situation back in the 90s where we won the President's Trophy and then went on to miss the next season through injuries and everything else. This is a harder team to put your finger on what exactly is wrong with the Winnipeg Jets. It's really difficult. They've got the MVP of the league and the multi-Vezina Trophy winner in Connor Hellebuck in net. Mark Scheifele is a terrific player. Kyle Connor is terrific. Velarde is terrific. They've got a Norris Trophy candidate in Josh Morrissey playing for the team. So it's really hard to put your finger on what's going wrong with the Jets. And the comparison to last year's Rangers isn't really comparable because unlike Chris Drury, Kevin Cheveldayoff didn't, completely implode his team on his own by stripping it apart. I have a feeling, and I watched last night's game that they played with Toronto, and I have a feeling they're going to get it going again. I think they're just in that horrible place you get in when you're on a losing streak.
They're only 7 points out of a wild card right now, so it's not like they can't reverse fortunes here. But part of the concern, I think, is the dependency on Scheifele and Connor. And Sportsnet had a very good graphic last night of the 5 players that were in on the greatest percentage of their team's goals. And you saw Connor McDavid, Macklin Celebrini, Nathan McKinnon. But that you see 2 Jets there, as opposed to just the single players that I just mentioned, kind of speaks to how reliant they are. And when you don't have the support scoring, and Vladimir Mestikov has not had a very productive year, Cole Perfetti has not had a real productive year, and when you don't have that back-end contribution and you're just relying on 2 guys, and yes, Hellebuck had the injury also, but you can almost see where these problems are manifesting from. And yes, we've talked about Nikolai Ehlers not being with the club. He went to Carolina. They also lost Mason Appleton, who is a very serviceable bottom 6 forward who's doing really good things in Detroit this year. So now you put this all in the blender, and it's not hard to see why this team has struggled so much this year.
Yeah, and one of their additions was Jonathan Toews. As you mentioned, he played against Detroit, and that's the first time that Kane and Toews had played against each other in the NHL. They played against each other in international play, but that's the first time they went against each other on different NHL teams, and neither one of the teams were Chicago, where those 2 guys did their histrionics earlier in the 2000s. So that was quite a thing to see. But with the Winnipeg Jets, they're not getting secondary scoring. You're right. It's all dependent upon Scheifele and Connor, and they're just going to have to figure this out. But it looks to me like last night's game against Toronto was the last loss in a losing streak. In other words, it's a game they should have won. They somehow didn't. They'll fix whatever they have to fix, and they'll start the machine rolling in the other direction.
I'm baffled by 2 other clubs in the Western Conference right now. Vegas Golden Knights. 3 wins in their last 14 home games after a 4-2 loss to Nashville on New Year's Eve. That was against Steven Stamkos. Became the 22nd player to reach 600 goals. Nashville playing much better, but we're talking Vegas here. And this was a game that looks like they may be losing Braden McNabb for a period of time. Jack Eichel has been out. And to me, it just seems that Vegas is a team that always has some sort of injury issue going on. Mark Stone is healthy right now, but he has been out periodically over time. And you just wonder, at what point are the Bills going to come due? Because they have had a remarkable amount of success since they came into the NHL. And this was a club that I think a lot of people expected to be right up there at the end. And they may very well be that. But I just see them a notch below, even with the addition of Mitch Marner.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly have had a lot of injury bug, too, this season. It has not been easy for them. And as you said, that home record is tough. And when I say only, because of the fact that they've only got 3 wins in their last 14 at home. So in their first 6, they did okay, but now only 3 wins in their last 14. Every night you see Vegas on the schedule, you think, okay, Vegas will probably win that one. Vegas will probably win this one. Vegas will probably win that one. And they're not winning. And like you said, at some point, the waiter's going to bring the bill over to the table, and they're going to have to pay.
They were up 2-0 in that game against Nashville and were completely dominant and took their foot off the gas, and Predators, to their credit, went right past them.
And there's another team, the Predators, that are playing better than any of us thought they would be playing at this point. They've come on as well. So I don't want to talk about them. We're talking about Vegas. But, yeah, I mean, Vegas is only a few points into the playoffs right now because everything is so muddled up in the standings. Vegas has 45 points right now. The last wildcard team is Seattle at this point with 41 points. So, you know, they don't have a big margin for error. They're 3-4-3 in their last 10. They're going to have to get it, as you said, put their foot back on the gas.
Here's another team that baffles me. Dallas Stars, 0-2-2 in their last 4. 2 of those losses coming to the Chicago Blackhawks. This is a club that I think that we have seen year after year after year. They have all of this talent. They look on paper to be one of the most solid rosters in the NHL, as has been built by Jim Nill. But it doesn't seem to matter whether it's Ken Hitchcock or Lindy Ruff or Peter DeBoer or Glenn Gulletson 2.0. Dallas seems to get into these funks during the course of a regular season that it's kind of hard to figure out when you watch this team why they are not more consistent into a level like Colorado right now.
Yeah, and even though they're a plus 30, which is the second highest plus minus behind Colorado, who's just a stunning plus 71, the Dallas Stars, you just don't know from night to night what you're going to get from them. They've only lost 3 road games in regulation, only 3.
Yeah.
I mean, they do have a record that everybody else in the league would love to have it. They're well into the playoffs. They're 10 points back of the mighty Colorado Avalanche, but still, they're well in at playing almost 700 hockey. But again, you just don't know from night to night what you're going to get.
It just doesn't feel like it, though.
No, it does
not. With that winning percentage, you know, it feels a lot less than it actually is.
Because I think the consistency isn't there. And just when you expect them to win, like you said, against Chicago, they end up losing. They blow it. They drop a game. They don't come out prepared to play. And it's stunning. You wonder why this team isn't more consistent than they are. Well, they have the player personnel. Gulletson is a good coach, but they should be even better than they are.
Let's move over and talk about a couple of other clubs that are coming to my attention. Montreal Canadiens. And you remember, Neil, early in the season, all of the drama with the late game wins that they were having at the Bell Center, big comebacks.
Yeah, they was exciting for the fans. There's nothing more exciting than a come from behind win.
Well, they've taken that show on the road because they are now 3-0-2 on a 7-game road trip. That's a season long for them. And after they came back to salvage a point in Tampa Bay, on Tuesday, they erased a 2-0 deficit in Florida. Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki scoring 3:05 apart. The final 5 minutes to force overtime. For Suzuki, won it in overtime. And then Thursday in Carolina, they trailed 4-2 and scored 4 straight for hanging on for a 7-5 win. So you watch this team and there is no quit in them. They're a dangerous club. They almost seem to revel in playing from behind. And you remember people saying about going through Tampa Bay, Florida, Carolina. That was the Southeast United States gauntlet. And they have picked up 5 out of 6 points in the most difficult ways imaginable.
The game that they played in Carolina last night, we mentioned Nikolai Ehlers being missing from the Winnipeg Jets this season. Well, he's Josh Anderson's best friend because he put it right on his stick in the slot I was stunned by that one in that game. Yeah. But Montreal Canadiens, the one thing that we've got to say, though, that you've got to question every night is the goaltending. Are they going to get good goaltending that night? Because they haven't gotten consistency between the pipes. But they are a growing club. They're getting better. We wondered whether they were for real when they snuck into the playoffs last year. But this year they seem to be a team that is growing. They're getting better. They're not sliding backwards. Good for Marty St. Louis, because there was a lot of people questioning him from time to time, and was he the right guy for Montreal? But they're playing 600 hockey right now, over 600. Mm-hmm. Pretty impressive, really. And what's most impressive about Montreal is their road record, 11-3-5. And so, we'll have to watch them carefully, but right now they look like a certain playoff team. At this point, they do look like that.
We said that about clubs in October, November, and so jury's still out. And by the way, you mentioned Josh Anderson before. He actually left that game and did not return, and they also played that game without defenseman Mike Matheson. What do you make of the Columbus Blue Jackets? So on Sunday, their flight gets delayed, leaving Columbus to go to Ottawa to play on Monday. Mechanical issues. They wind up not arriving in Ottawa until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, go right to the arena, and wind up dominating the Senators 4-1. But then they play the Devils in their next game, blow a 2-0 lead in the third period, giving up 3 goals in $1.56. The Blue Jackets have blown multiple goal leads multiple times this season. They've had 12 leads in the third period at some point that have gotten away, even though they've gotten points in some of those games. They're last in the Eastern Conference. And for a team that was looking to build on a real galvanizing season that they had last year after the loss of Johnny Gaudreau, they're doing all the things necessary to keep them out of playoff position this year.
They are. Now, to be fair to them, Zach Werenski has missed the last couple of games, who's a huge part of that team. I mean, He is a Norris Trophy candidate for sure. Yeah, at Columbus, that was really odd that they played and then didn't get to travel to Ottawa. If I was Ottawa, I would just be fuming that we lost that game to Columbus at home when Columbus didn't even get into the building until very late. But Columbus has not made strides this season for whatever reasons. I mean, they've had some injuries, yes, but their home record is not great, 8-7-3. Their road record is right at 500. Right now, they sit at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, but actually the Rangers on a winning percentage are at the bottom of the Eastern Conference by 1 decimal point, but it's still not good. And for Columbus, who wanted to make some strides again this year, it doesn't look good.
It's all because they haven't been able to close games.
Absolutely.
They've been a top 3 in the Metro. Let's hit some personnel notes. And let's go back to Carolina for a second, because goaltender Pyotr Kochetkov likely out for the remainder of the season. He's expected to have surgery for a lower body injury he's been dealing with all season. So now they're going to go with Freddie Anderson and Brandon Bussey. And Anderson against Pittsburgh on Tuesday, 5 goals against on 28 shots. And Bussey against Montreal on Thursday, 6 goals against on 22 shots. So the goaltending year after year in the postseason has been a problem. Freddie Anderson is now supposedly back at least on the front lines here after kind of being the number 3. But once again, if Kochetkov is out for the season, and I'm not saying that he was going to bring him to the promised land either, but what you are going to see is the same problem cropping up once again when we get to April for Carolina.
And what they've got to really hope is that this young kid, Bussy, that's an unknown and has come in and played extremely well for them this season, other than, as you mentioned, these last couple of games. I mean, Bussy's save percentage is over 900. His goals against is 2.3. His record is 13-2. You got to hope that he continues his play. He didn't look good against Montreal, obviously, allowing 6 goals, but the team didn't really look that good either. It's the same story with this team year after year. Are they going to have good enough goaltending to get anywhere in the playoffs? And usually the answer has been no.
Bussy's been great at home this year, to his credit. And it's not to say that a goaltender can't go into the playoffs for the first time and do well, because Adin Hill did that for the Vegas Golden Knights. He never played a playoff game before and became a Stanley Cup winner in 2023. So it's not impossible, but I'm just not loving the vibe that I get. And it's probably just given the history of Carolina in the playoffs in that goaltending position.
I think that that's probably what you're feeling, is that they do this year after year, and we're not sure that they're a heavy enough team up front even to go far in the playoffs. So we can't put it all on the goaltending. But at least for the rest of the second half of the regular season, without a Kochetkov, they're going to have to depend on Bussy and Anderson. And, of course, we don't have a lot of faith in Anderson. When I say we, I mean you and me. Brandon Bussy is an unknown, although his body of work to this point, we have to say, is very good.
Other injury notes: Frank Vitrano of the Anaheim Ducks out approximately 6 weeks. He had a shoulder fracture that was suffered in Los Angeles on December 27th. Chris Tanev expected to be out for a significant amount of time. It's going to be the third time this year he's on IR. It's a groin injury this time. Connor Garland and Marco Rossi, forwards for the Vancouver Canucks, expected to miss at least a week. And Miles Wood on IR for the Columbus Blue Jackets after Wednesday's loss to New Jersey. An apparent leg injury after getting tangled up with Andre Palat. Connor Sheary for the New York Rangers on LTIR with a lower body injury suffered in the loss to Washington on Wednesday, but the team did get Adam Fox back, who returned after missing 14 games with an upper body injury suffered on November the 29th. But in the grand scheme of things, the Rangers have already played 42 games and are languishing in the Eastern Conference. So while this is going to help, does this club have enough depth elsewhere to really make any noise in the second half of the season?
Right, I would think not. And, you know, you can talk about they've got the best goalie in the world in Shesterkin, but even he hasn't played up to that standard. They really don't have anything going for them right now. The Rangers don't. And getting Adam Fox back is a huge plus for them, but I can't imagine that that's going to be enough to turn the ship around.
Another return to speak about: Eric Chernak for the Tampa Bay Lightning returned to their back line in Anaheim on Wednesday. He had missed 17 games due to a hand injury. A couple of other notes: forward Noah Philp has been claimed off waivers by Carolina from the Edmonton Oilers. And we had talked about Igor Chenikov being dealt from Columbus to Pittsburgh. We mentioned that on Monday. Forward Denton Heinen was also part of that deal going to Columbus. And so the end result is Chenikov in Pittsburgh and Heinen and 2 draft picks in Columbus. Heinen is a UFA at the end of the season, Chenikov an RFA for Pittsburgh. And the Penguins also acquired defenseman Igor Zamula from Philadelphia in exchange for Philip Tomasino, a forward. Tomasino was acquired by the Penguins a year ago from Nashville. So there's a lot of moving parts here with Pittsburgh. And do we see any true improvement in the roster, or are we just moving deck chairs around the Titanic here?
I think you're just moving deck chairs around. There's a lot of changing and switching, but I don't see any real big improvements in the roster with the changes that they're making. There's only so much you can do with a lineup that doesn't have a lot of talent. You've got this extreme high-end talent with Crosby, and we've mentioned this a bunch of times.
Oh, yeah.
But, when you get down to the lower players, they're just, it seems like you said, they're just moving deck chairs.
It doesn't appear like there's a real long-term plan here, because in this Chinnikov deal, you do get a player with a lot of promise, and perhaps they'll get something out of Zamula that the Flyers weren't able to get out of him, and he spent time in the minors this year. But you're giving up draft picks also. So I'm not quite sure where Kyle Dubas is going with all this.
Yeah, but I've never seen the plan. I've never understood it right from the get-go with Dubas as soon as he arrived there, and immediately traded for Erik Karlsson. So right from then on, I haven't seen or been able to understand from my vantage point what the plan is with the Penguins. Are they rebuilding? Are they going for it? Which are they doing? Which way are they going?
I don't think you're going for it with this team.
You can't be going for it. You've got to be rebuilding, but is this rebuilding? I don't see how you can do this. This is sort of a half-assed way of doing things.
As we head into the weekend, World Junior Championships continue on Friday with quarterfinal action. Sweden plays Latvia, Czechia plays Switzerland, the USA, second in Group A, plays Finland, and Canada, first in Group B, plays Slovakia. This weekend, the Winter Classic on Friday, Rangers in Florida. And one thing I can say about this, I think the visuals are going to be terrific. Maybe not the game so much, but Steve Mayer and his group do a remarkable job creating the setting for these things, and it always looks better at night.
Oh, yeah, and this will be a fun game. I mean, it'll be fun just to see an outdoor game in Florida, even though there is a top that can go over it if they have to do that. But they're hoping to leave it open, and it'll just be fun to watch.
Rangers 5-0 in outdoor games over the course of their history, so perhaps that's the one thing that they have going for them. On Saturday, we hit the midway point in the schedule. Games I'm looking at, Buffalo at Columbus. Let's see if that winning streak for the Sabres reaches 11. Colorado at Carolina. See if the Avalanche can continue rampaging through the league. And Toronto and the Islanders. And it appears that the Leafs, they have a little juice this past week. They played without Nylander and Matthews earlier in the week, won a game, playing with a little bit more jam than I think we're used to seeing, and of course had that win on Thursday against Winnipeg. And the Islanders, hopefully not losing Bo Horvat for that long, but now this team is going to continue to get tested here in the second half of the season.
Oh, for sure. And Palmieri is out for the season. Now, if Horvat's out again, which he is going to be out, there's no chance he's going to play in that game against Toronto. Toronto, they didn't play that well against Winnipeg, really. They got down 2-0. Mm-hmm. They came back. It kept going back and forth. The game did. I think Winnipeg slipped into that, oh, no, we're going to lose again type of mindset and didn't have the confidence. So Toronto ends up coming out on the long end of the stick with Matthews getting the hat trick. But Toronto is certainly not out of the woods. And when you predict a game like Toronto at the Islanders on Saturday, you look and say, well, Toronto versus Islanders, got to be Toronto. Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily. And yet the Islanders have their own troubles yesterday in an afternoon game against Utah, getting thumped 7-2. So we'll see, but that'll be a one to keep your eye on and see, is Toronto coming out of this funk that they've been in, or are they staying in it?
On Sunday, Montreal at Dallas, simply to see if the Canadiens can keep going during the course of this road trip. This will be the 7th and final game because they'll play in St. Louis on Saturday. And Dallas managed to get that game to 4-3 against Chicago. And we're pushing right at the end. So let's see if now this is a continuation for them and they get off a little bit better than we've seen in the last 4 games.
Yeah, and I'd like to see some consistency in Dallas where, night to night, which you're not seeing. And, of course, I'm saying that about so many teams. We'd see inconsistency, but I guess that's what makes it so interesting.
Our website is NHLWraparound.com. And again, wherever you listen to your podcast, leave a comment or a review if you can. And also, if you tune in on YouTube, please subscribe. So, partner, we're off. 2026.
2026 has started. Enjoy the hockey and enjoy the outdoor game, which will be a lot of fun. I think even though it's the Rangers in Florida, and obviously Florida is a little bit stronger team than the Rangers this year, even with all their injuries. But midway through the season and on to the second half.
Short shifts on Monday, NHL Wraparound next Wednesday. Have a great weekend.